We're in Spain in our motorhome, although technically it's still classed as an HGV until DVLA confirm otherwise. We are here to share a tour of our Mercedes Vario. I think it's first important, before we go into the interiors and how it's been converted, to talk about why a Mercedes Vario and the quirks of a Mercedes Vario. So we've got a Mercedes 813D. The 813 and 814 is more common, but the 813 is slightly more economical. Mercedes Varios are no longer in production. I have a bit of a love of vans that are a little bit more quirky and just have a particular personality to them. I had a Bongo before this, which again was something that was quirky. They weren't making it anymore. It was Japanese import. Not many people understood them or kind of had heard of them, but it had so much functionality to it, which is why for our family the Bongo really worked. So when I was looking at vans, I looked at the generic like Renault, Fiat, Mercedes, ready-made vans, and they just didn't feel like they would work for our family. We have 3 children, we have a cat and a dog. The seat belts, first and foremost, were an issue. Functionality just wasn't as I needed it to be. I also just didn't like many of the interiors at all. However, I can see the pros of a ready-made van over a converted van. There are pros and cons for every van that you're going to choose. You simply just have to choose the van that you feel works best for you. The thing about a Mercedes Vario is that it is a heavy van, so this technically is up to a 7.5 ton van. It's over 3.5 tons. So in the UK, you have to redo your license for that, which was an absolute hassle and a real cost. We did a course each, it was £800 each. And that meant that we would be put through the paces and then put through the test. It's a proper, obviously, DVLA test, and there's so much to say on that process. Driving something like that, actually having a course in it was actually really, really helpful, because the course enabled me to understand how to drive a 7.5 half-metre length van and 2.5 wide metre van, how the stopping distances and everything changes when you're driving a heavier van. So I don't think it's a negative. It's actually something that, you know, we've done and is experienced. But this van has a few extras to it, which really enables it to drive in a way that just seems really beautiful for me, which is 6 gears. I love having 6 gears. I love that it's an HGV, because the HGV engine, although it's quirky in that you have to find the right mechanics, the people that understand it, an HGV engine is such a gift. I mean, these are obviously classed as like million-mile engines for a reason. You know, you're not revving it past like 1,500-2,000 revs. It's like such a gift to be like changing down to that 6th gear on the dual carriageway. She's not the fastest thing in the world, but that's not the point. The Bongo was a really good intro, because the Bongo would rarely get up to past the 55 mile per hour mark. So I was really introduced to what it means to drive a van. The other thing that this has is an exhaust brake, and the exhaust brake enables me to slow down on more trickier downhills. Mercedes Vario generally have a bit of a cult following, I would say. Something really beautiful around having other people who understand what a Vario is. The one thing that Varios have is rust, a lot of rust. So finding the right Vario for you is really challenging. This Vario was actually kept inside for most of its life. It was used for broadcasting for like Donington racetrack, and had like cameras in the back and camera on the top to take the video footage of the cars on the track. And then they obviously had 2 actually, from what I've seen on their Instagram, and they lovingly kept them indoors for most of their life. So the rust on it, although there's like tiny spots of rust, Bongos are also famous for rust, even more famous than a Vario. So finding that is quite tricky. We paid 25,000 for the Vario in its entirety without obviously conversion, quite a lot, probably paid over the usual for it. But because it was rust free, because I was buying it from a company, and because I needed it really, really quickly so I could convert it to live in it, out like the price that needed to be paid. You can see that there's a really spacious cab. Inside the cab, I've hung up a couple of jumpers, and I tried to make it feel a bit more boho, because we do sit in it quite a lot, and I actually work in here and use it as my desk area, which has been a real gift. It's also used as a sun lounger. The thing I love is that this is just so big and spacious that you can put it out. It can be like a desk in itself. The cat to have like a safe space if she needs that. Inside the van, we didn't convert it ourselves. We paid Craig at Joe's Campers to convert it. The reason why we didn't convert it ourselves was because we have 3 children. Time, we needed it to be done quickly. We had never lived in a caravan van. I keep calling it caravan because that's what it's called on the continent. We've not lived in a van. We didn't really know what we were looking for in any which way, shape or form. We needed expert advice and we needed it to be right the first time because we wanted to be on this journey until the children grew out of this van, or maybe that never happened, but we wanted to make sure that that was avoided. Okay, so this area was one of the hardest parts of the build. The Vario's floor is wooden, which is a quirk that Craig and I didn't realise when we were doing it. So that meant that we had to cut out the wooden floor to weld the seats on. These are safety checked seats for the children. I'm not really into the whole like let's just shove a seat in, the rock and roll bed thing. Like I wanted it to be proper. So these are 3 seats. We wanted originally it to be this way, but that seat actually does take over this access to the cab a little bit, which is slightly frustrating, but it still works. So we thought about changing it to here, but then this cupboard door wouldn't open. So we have 3 seats that we then put these covers on to make it feel like it's part of the van, and then we take them off and we put their high back boosters in for now until they're heavy enough and tall enough to come out of the high back. We also have their toy storage underneath here because they have so much toys that we managed to whittle it down to just these 3 baskets, which I think is pretty impressive for a child. But then when they're driving along, they get to get their toys out and they just throw their toys in their basket. We put this window in, which now enables them to see out and enables them to get air as and when needed. There are 2 cupboards here which go above. In the cupboards, we have storage. I'm really into these plastic things from Primark because it enables them to be piled up. And in them is a lot of crafting, so they can just reach up and get their crafts out. The other thing that we put in after was for extra storage. It's a whole cupboard that enables us to put all our clothes in. Most of our clothes in here, apart from coats and everything in the back. Having that is of real use and doesn't take up too much room when you come in. We designed it with ply, so everything is boarded out in ply apart from the roof, and soft lighting. So we do have the overhead lights, spotlights, but in general we have these really nice soft lights that go overhead. That just makes it feel much more homely, I think. The kitchen was designed to feel like it could be spacious and it doesn't feel like there's too much here, like on the side, but also have enough storage. So over the top here, we have a lot of storage. We managed to fit in most of our food and tea, and it's all labelled as it needs to be so that we can access it really easily. Here we have a really big sink. We actually went for a normal household sink, which was a bit of a headache. There's a whole thing around sinks and plugs and plumbing in a camper. If you plunger it every now and then, it works just fine. A normal household tap. I had a bit of a love of brass, so most of the things where possible was brass. But then having a bigger sink meant that it took up quite a lot of cupboard space, but that's fine because we still managed to fit in here. Got our pots and pans, and we've also got our cutlery in here. In the cupboard next to it, we actually have a full size, well, I would say as big as you're gonna probably want to fit in a camper this size. A really decent sized fridge and a small freezer at the top. The other thing that we have on this side is a oven, but also it's an air fryer. It uses a lot of electricity, so we tend to only use that if we plug in. And we have all of our crockery here, bin, cat and dog food. The other quirk that we have is that this camper is completely electricity, so there's no gas. There will be arguments, pros and cons that, and only time will tell as to whether we've made a mistake by just having electricity only. I think in the full summer it will absolutely pay off not having to deal with gas. I also have probably this like unnecessary fear of gas anyway. I'm not a massive gas lover. Decided to go completely off-grid, which has meant that the batteries are bigger, but I really do love the induction hob. So Craig lovingly made this to protect it after we had a slight incident around a roundabout. But this is the induction hob, which honestly is amazing. I really love the induction hob. This is the bedroom area. We really struggled to design the van taking into account 3 children, and the beds to feel like they were big enough, because we didn't want beds that weren't fixed. We just didn't feel like we would want to be making up a bed every day. We may eventually put like a hydraulic bed over the cab, which would enable one of them to go over there, depending on how long this journey lasts. But for now, the setup is this. We thought about having pods at the top, so there would have been 3 pods along the top. We also thought about having 3 pods along the side, but none of that worked out space-wise, especially as they're growing and growing quickly at this age, because they're 7 and 9. So we've actually got the twins are up here, and we do actually have a board that pops out and separates them if they need that extra like kind of secret space, but they tend to like just having it open. And then my son is in here, and he has like this longer pod he really loves, and then we have this double. It was a lot of adjusting and getting used to. I put a really thick mattress on, which then meant we lost even more space here. It means that to get in and out is a bit of a jiggery pokery scenario, but actually when you're in it, it feels kind of cozy and it doesn't feel like it's a problem. And if it's warm, we open the back doors, and it feels really nice to have that extra space here that is open and isn't enclosed. So it does work. It's just that long term, how long will it work for? We don't know, but right now it works for us, and I think that's all that matters. I think if you were doing this and they were growing and they wanted more space, then you'd probably then take this off. You'd have this back open. One of these beds would then disappear and go over the cab. That would be a long-term solution, I think, for the Vario. We also went with really nice linen and cotton sheets, which mean they kind of like feel a lot more like they would withstand wear and also lack of wash or more wash, depending on what happens. So I'm actually really happy with how cozy the area is. And my friend tried it and she said that the best bed was mine. So I've lucked out anyway. Underneath the bed area is the back. So it's the boot area, and we have a lot of storage in the boot, and obviously the batteries, and we also have a diesel heater, so that's all in the boot. It was really great to be able to fit this cupboard in. It enables us to put all of our like toiletries in here. So we actually have toiletries, and my son's clothes are in here. That's been really useful just to have that extra bit of storage, and I'm really glad that we went with the drawers because it just compartmentalizes the area a little bit more. The diesel heater comes out here, but the sensor is by the door. So once we know that this has got to like a really good temperature, then we know that actually that will be manageable over there. But we haven't really tested it in anything really, really cold. I think the coldest we've been is like 5 degrees. Is that really cringe? I wanted to have a sliding door of some sort, so we've gone with this. Would I do it again? No, I would not use one of these plastic doors again. The plastic door does the job. So we actually went with a composting toilet. That was really important for me, and I'm so glad that we've gone with a composting toilet. We didn't make it ourselves, the best of the best I could find. So we went to Trelino, £1,000. It cost me £1,000 to put it in. However, I'm so glad that we are able to use a compost loo. And as a family of 5, it works perfectly, and the children got used to it straight away. So I would never hesitate to have a compost loo. In fact, we've decided that we would only ever have a compost loo wherever we are. And we have a very small area, but we have storage for the compost toilet needs, a tiny mirror, and a tiny toilet holder. We did want a sink. It wasn't quite big enough. It does the job. The rear end. This is where we store a lot of our things that we use quite regularly within the day. So for example, we have our coats and we have our toolbox, yoga mat. We also have a backdoor shower. I actually was very skeptical about, but I'm actually convinced by the backdoor shower. I wanted something posh that kind of came up here, but actually the plug-in works really, really well. The batteries are all in here, the diesel heater's all in here. We have books in here, games. I even have my sewing machine in here. So I'm very happy. And when the back door is open, it lets a lot of air in. So in the heat, when we travel further into that, I think it'll be a really beautiful addition to have the back doors that open. The one thing that was really challenging on the Vario was getting windows in. These were custom made for the Vario, and they put the black around. They don't open. What they say is like proof, like you could throw a brick at it and they wouldn't break. They're not the privacy glass like the rest of it, but I'm really, really happy with the windows. I just really wanted some kind of window on the back of it. And finally, the rack. The rack was a really important addition for us. So we have it with the ladder and it enables us to sit up there. It has decking, literally got decking up there. Storage bags, which stores the outside beach equipment mainly. All our solars are up there, and we also have space to have the internet up there, and it just works really well. It's one of the favorite places that the children like to hang out, and we can't wait for more sunshine so that we can sit up there and enjoy some sunsets and some sunrises. That is the tour of our Vario.